Kia ora te whānau I hukaraiti ko Andrew Doubleday aho. Today we're looking at the Gospel text for Sunday the 19th of April 2026. It's Luke chapter 24 verses 13 through to 35, and it's literally a heartwarming story. So we pick up the narrative, Luke 24 verse 13. Now, on that same day, this is Resurrection Day, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles, that's 11 kilometers, from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And they said to him, or he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some of the women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "O you, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in the scriptures. And as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he'd been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Wonderful story, eh? So, who are this couple? As a younger person growing up in the context of the Open Brethren, I assumed that they were just two men, because we were the brethren and it's all about men. Disciples, though, on the fringe of the inner 12. I find it interesting how culture shapes how we see. What I'm going to suggest today is the likelihood that they were an aging married couple on their way home. Cleopas, who's the one whose name is given, could also be the same person mentioned in John 19 and 25, although it's really relating to his wife. His name, Clopas, could be the same. It says that near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, Mary, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. So there's 3 Marys. Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the wife of Clopas. Mary's sister, probably sister-in-law, meaning that Cleopas/Clopas was either Mary's brother or Joseph's brother. Tradition suggests that Cleopas was Joseph's brother. Either way, this couple could very easily have been uncle and auntie to Jesus. I've noted before how many of Jesus' closest followers were related to him, either through family, familial relationships, or through business connections. So they're there. Of course they are. And it's just possible that one of this couple were at the empty tomb that morning. They'd spent the weekend in Jerusalem. They were there initially for the Passover and ultimately to support Mary, Jesus' mother, and perhaps the rest of the disciples when everything went pear-shaped. They're part of a strong web of interconnected relationships. And they are very likely then older than most of the others. Perhaps the kind of elders of the group almost had this word like camp parents. You know, that kind of role that others look to provide a measure of strength and stability when things are all going a little bit haywire. And now here they are heading to Emmaus. And as we read the narrative, it's clearly presents a strong picture that Emmaus represents home for them. And perhaps for at least one of them, there's a desire to restore a little bit of normality, to bring a little bit of solidness back into life after the chaos of the previous days. Now, Emmaus is 7 miles from Jerusalem. That's 11 kilometers. Probably about 2.5 hours to just walk from one place to the other. This is not an easy commute, unlike Bethany, which is in the opposite direction, although it's uphill. And they likely felt like they'd done their time in Jerusalem and wanted to be home. Well, at least perhaps one of them did. And they're travelling. As they're travelling, they're in an intense conversation. Now, the NRSV doesn't give that sense of it, but the commentaries that I've considered indicate that they're involved in a fairly emotional encounter. And maybe they're in contention about what has just happened, and perhaps about whether or not they should even be heading home. Now, being in a couple, I can imagine this to be highly likely. One wants to stay with the team in Jerusalem. The other wants to just get home and to re-establish their bearings. And in the middle of this, Jesus quietly comes up alongside. They barely notice. They're right in the middle of where they are. And Jesus gently inserts himself into the conversation. And now they're talking on and engaged with him on what they're actually agreed about, but have found very difficult to handle. Their grief and confusion is laid bare. And Jesus, unrecognized, just a stranger traveling the same road, starts Bible study. Now, it's important to remember that they didn't have a plethora of individual copies of the scriptures. And in fact, I'd suspect that very few, if any, would have their own complete set of scrolls and of documents. They didn't have multiple translations and multiple Bibles sitting on their shelves, as I can see mine stretching into the distance. They didn't have pocket Bibles that they could just carry around with them, or phones with Bible apps, like I've got with dozens of translations on it. The thing is that the scriptures they had were copied by hand. And for most of them, their knowledge was gained orally. They'd listened to the scriptures read and committed it to memory. And here we have Jesus with perfect recall. And he'll be able, as he did, to progressively work his way through scriptures. It says he explained to them from all the scriptures, starting with Moses, working his way through. And I imagine this took some time. And they're so taken with the message that they fail to see the messenger. It's probably how it ought to be, eh? We get so taken up with the message that we fail to see the messenger. Yeah. And it could be that they have been supernaturally prevented from recognizing Jesus. Or it could be that they don't see because they don't expect to see. Jesus is the last person they would expect to be walking along with them. The very last person, especially on this day. They were witnesses to the crucifixion. They were witnesses to the burial. They were there. They'd been with the disciples through all the grief and messiness and sorrow of the last few days. They had heard the rumour of the resurrection, and maybe one had seen the empty tomb. But Jesus, no. And that he would be walking with them? No. No. Not today. Not today of all days. So even if they were expecting a risen Christ, surely he would have more important people to be spending time with. Surely he'd have more important places to be. Surely he wouldn't be giving so much time to one obscure, unimportant couple who ultimately slip from the pages of history. We don't hear anything of them again. It's remarkable. When you think about it, it's remarkable. All up, Jesus could have spent 2 hours, maybe more, with this couple on this day of all days. A couple of relative nobodies. Yet here they are together. And not just together, they're engaged actively, intensely. I can imagine how this couple would have looked back on this time in the days, weeks, months, and years that followed. The preciousness of Jesus' gift of time and serious attention, even on a day like this. What are we to make of this? Well, I want to suggest that it tells us is that no one, absolutely no one, is unimportant to God. There are no nobodies. There are no irrelevance. There are no insignificance in Jesus' economy. If Jesus gives such time and loving attention to such a couple on such a day, such a personally important day, what is he inviting us into? How is he inviting us to see the people around us, those he brings across our path, even in those serendipitous, coincidental moments? Now, if you've listened to me for any time, you'll know that I become convinced that there are no coincidences. There are just divine invitations to engagement, and we get to say yes or no. Jesus takes up this opportunity with this couple on the road to Emmaus. And where is it that Jesus is inviting us, you and me, to walk with him? In the ordinary moments, when we're not looking for him, not expecting him, yet offering us time to engage and experience him. I'm convinced that it's happening far more often than most of us recognise, because we're missing what's right in front of us, right alongside us in the here and now. It's time to start noticing the presence of Jesus, both in those quiet, solitary moments and in our engagement with others. Amen. God bless you.